I'm really excited and honored to be joined by Minnesota's Lieutenant Governor and the candidate running for the U.S. Senate seat in Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining. Gloves off amidst everything you are going through in your state right now.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you.
So I wanted to start by obviously hearing about how you have been experiencing everything that's been happening on the ground in your state these past number of weeks. And I was really unnerved when I was doing a little bit of my prep for this interview, as I'm sure some of our listeners will be, to be reminded that um, it was just last summer that you lost your colleague in the state house to a really horrific assassination, Melissa Hortman, the speaker in the house in Minnesota. And I know that these events are not directly related in any way whatsoever, but I was really unnerved by just that amount of political violence and trauma that you and your colleagues and your constituents have been enduring. And I was curious to hear how you're reflecting on everything that's happened in Minnesota this past year and what sense you and others are making of it. Why Minnesota?
Whew. Um, we've really been through it, and losing Melissa Hortman and Mark and the assassination attempt on Senator Hoffman and his wife and daughter. It was incredibly jarring, and there was a whole list of folks, right, who were potential targets for this guy. I was also on that list. And, it is this new reality for so many of us. And, that I think additionally, the shooting that happened at Annunciation Catholic School this summer, and now this, it is trauma after trauma after trauma. And so I think we're all just holding it as best we can. And if I'm being, just really candid, I think we are in Minnesota, we are exhausted, but not tired. As Minnesota is on the front lines, I also think that, Donald Trump and his rhetoric, be it, what we've been hearing, just ramping up the, political discourse and divisiveness in our country, but also, what led up to, I think, Operation Metro Surge, just uh, his deep commitment to mass deportations. It is just this continued rhetoric. But I think Donald Trump underestimated Minnesota. We care about each other so much here. And, as we see 50,000 of us marching in the streets in negative 15, degree weather, I have never felt more powerful than I did on Saturday, walking with tens of thousands of people and just saying we are showing up for our neighbors, we are who we are. And while we might be afraid, we are still some of the bravest people that you will ever meet. And it is that through line, through all of this tragedy, through all of this trauma, that I think you see on full display. Minnesotans are built different, and we care about each other tremendously and will continue to show up, because what other choice do we have?
It's right. And it has been so inspiring to watch from afar to see what everyone in Minnesota has gone through, but it's obviously affected the entire country. And then to see those images of people in the freezing cold marching, to hear the stories of the hyperlocal organizing and signal groups, the infusion of more witnesses and volunteers after Renee and Alex's murders by the federal government. It truly has been inspiring. And I've been having conversations with a few of your fellow leaders and colleagues in the state over the past few days. And you all have really shown us, not not just you all leaders, but truly the people in the streets, the neighbors, the communities, what it looks like to stand up against these atrocities and this overreach of government, and the trauma and terror they're inflicting on communities that we know won't end in your state. There's also just something so, I don't know the right word for it, but heavy about the contrast that you sort of just noted, right? Minnesota, under your leadership and your colleagues' leadership, has passed some of the most progressive pieces of legislation in this country. Like, just knowing what you guys do for Minnesotans and Minnesota families is the playbook that we hope that Democrats and progressives adopt across this whole country. And do you think that has a role in this, in the decision and the retribution nature of this administration to target the Twin Cities?
I think it does. I think we are a North Star, right? We are the North Star state, but I think we are a North Star for what, progressive leadership looks like when you care about your neighbors. But it is also what you are seeing in the response. So we have an incredible organizing infrastructure here that has been intentionally built year after year after year. So, when I co-chaired the campaign to raise the minimum wage when I was at Children's Defense Fund, we had a coalition of over 70 faith, labor, right, and nonprofit organizations working in tandem. We then built on that infrastructure as we founded Minnesotans for Paid Family and Medical Leave, and had that win, driver's licenses for all. And then once we knew that Donald Trump had won, that infrastructure was activated once again. And as you noted, tens of thousands of people have been trained across the state to be constitutional observers, going through Know Your Rights trainings. Just on Monday night, I was with 200 other Catholics in the basement of the Basilica, having an organizing meeting about how we are going to respond in our parishes. So and that's like, not because I'm lieutenant governor, that's because like I'm a parishioner and looking out for, my neighbors. And it is soccer moms and dads and pastors and nurses, right? Who are answering this call right now, standing outside of daycares and schools and churches and businesses. All of that is part of this organizing infrastructure, this organizing culture where we look out for each other. And there are so many more people who've been activated who just say the killing of Renee Good is not okay with me. The killing of Alex Preddy is not okay with me. And so I am going to use the tools that I have in my toolbox, even if it is, long underwear, a warm jacket, and a whistle. Like, I can do that, right? Or, I can go buy 70 gallons of milk at Costco, right? To make sure that, people have access to food and nutrition right now. So it all is connected. But I think the most important piece is that strength, the foundation that has been laid, and what we are building, and how we know that our future is absolutely tied to one another.
And it's been evident for those of us outside of Minnesota watching, and without folks even knowing about the incredible organizing infrastructure, and everybody should be taking copious notes about that. If you don't have it in your state, I really hope and do believe that there are folks who are motivated by care for their community and their neighbors and compassion and love all over this country. And when they are tested, they will rise to it. They might not all have the history and infrastructure of organizing that Minnesota does, but that is the contrast that is so prescient right now, is the contrast of those who are motivated and standing up to fight because they're motivated by care and love and compassion, against forces that are literally motivated by hate and division.
That's right.
We just watched this entire epic play out within your state that we know is playing out all across this country. I hate to pivot to politics, but you are running for the U.S. Senate seat in Minnesota as all of this is happening. That race is this fall. You have a primary first, a Democratic primary, but you have been endorsed by senators like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey, Chris Murphy, and others. You also have enjoyed a really, really strong margin leading in the polls right now in the primary. And immigration was a topic before this operation by ICE in Minnesota, a big conversation topic, not just in Minnesota, but across the country. But I would say before what we've all witnessed and you've experienced directly in your state, um, you know, affordability is also a really big conversation, and what you've accomplished as lieutenant governor and part of the administration in the state is remarkable. What do you think all of the events of the past month, how do you think those have changed the conversation and the dynamics in your race, if at all? And I know we're talking in the middle of it, so it's very hard to zoom out, but I'm curious how you think they might change.
Well, I mean, I guess a couple of things. I would say, one, I am like so honored and humbled to be endorsed by, the progressive fighters on the front lines in Washington, D.C., right? Who are um, the Democrats who are sick and tired of fighting from a defensive crouch and, are really leading in this moment, and that they want me to be their colleague means a lot to me. But what I can tell you about, this piece about immigration right now, and I'm so glad that you said it, like this has been an issue, right? This isn't new. And I think for a lot of folks who may be, surprised by how the Trump administration is behaving in this moment, like then frankly, you just weren't paying attention. Because all throughout 2024, at every rally, at the Republican National Convention, right, there were bright red signs, all caps, exclamation point that said mass deportations now, right? It was not in the fine print. They made it clear. And if you were going to deport millions of people, you would have to do so in a way that was outrageous, right, and aggressive, which is what we see happening clearly. And in this primary, there's a pretty clear choice. In Minnesota, we had leaders Amy Klobuchar, Tina Smith, Kelly Morrison, Ilhan Omar, Betty McCollum, who all voted no to the Lake and Riley Act, which was the first piece of legislation that came out of the second Trump administration. And what the Lake and Riley Act does is strips immigrants of due process and allows for indefinite detention of individuals. And I say individuals because that is both adults and children. And my primary opponent, Angie Craig, was the only Democrat in Minnesota to vote in favor of that. So I had a problem with that vote then, and I still have a problem with it. And when ICE was in the streets in June of this year of last year in Los Angeles, she voted to praise ICE along with 74 other Democrats as people were literally being scooped up from elementary school graduations. And so I am grateful that she is now calling for Kristi Noem to be impeached. Me too. And I, am grateful that she is horrified by what she sees. But the folks on the ground, the people who are connected to immigrant communities, knew what was coming. And so we should have leaders who are voting humanity first and politics second all of the time. And so that is what this race is about. We have seen very clearly that support for ICE in this way and voting along with Donald Trump is a clear point of contrast between myself and my opponent. And I would say when it comes to issues of affordability, as we're doing our 44 stops across the state of Minnesota leading up to precinct caucuses, that comes up all the time. It is absolutely ICE in this response. They're not just in the Twin Cities, they are across Minnesota and in greater Minnesota and rural communities. But then the next thing that comes up is the high cost of living. It is healthcare, it is childcare, it is housing. And so, for me, Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage and indexing it to inflation, making sure that we are going big when it comes to housing so that people can go home, all of those things, the ability for people to afford the lives they want to live I was a kid who grew up on the margins, right? Who grew up with carrying a box of commodity cheese under my arm like a football, right? And so I think we don't have enough leaders like that in Washington, D.C., because if we did, we wouldn't have passed this big, ugly bill. We would have known what SNAP meant for families. We would have known what, Medicaid meant to the overall health of people. And so that's why I'm running. And I can tell you that other contrast is like, I'm not taking a dime of corporate PAC money because I think corporations have plenty of representation in Washington. I want to be beholden to Minnesotans, not to, corporations. And I think this seat belongs to Minnesotans and not to the highest bidder. So that is also, I think, the contrast and how this is playing out. We deserve fighters, and we deserve folks who are ready to throw down for Minnesotans because they know Minnesotans, they love Minnesotans, they are in the street with Minnesotans, and that is the campaign that I'm running.
And I think that, we have to be able to address the cynicism in this country. I mean, I think the moment we're in right now, because of the events within your state that everybody is watching in horror, is shifting the Overton window in a lot of ways, in terms of this being not about politics and this about being right and wrong and morality and what kind of government system we want to live in, and rule of law, all of these things. But separate from that, there has been a growing cynicism in this country that I personally believe Trump and Republicans hijacked, right? Claiming economic populism when they never meant it, of course, but also cynicism against the Democratic Party, Democrats in general, right? At the lowest approval rating ever. A lot of anger at leaders in Congress about not doing enough, not having their gloves off, even the ones who are fighting more than others that you mentioned that endorsed you, that are trying their best, having a window into that world. They're not doing a whole lot. I think that people have a lot of rightful anger. And my question to you is being a leader in state government, where honestly most of this work is happening, both the progress and the fighting on the front lines, against the administration, while Congress is essentially impotent as long as Democrats are in the minority and we have this lawless administration. Why do you want to be in the Senate, Lieutenant Governor?
Because I've seen what has happened on the ground here in Minnesota. And I was raised on the Wellstone for Senate campaign in 2002. That was Paul Wellstone was my first campaign. And what I watched Paul Wellstone do was travel all across the state of Minnesota, meet people in their living rooms and coffee shops and union halls, and connect with folks in a way where they felt like they were part of something bigger than themselves. I felt that in my bones. And so, we are traveling across the state, hearing directly from people, and what a privilege it is that I get to hold their stories. And, I was with 8 young people in Albert Lee who were high school students who led a walkout, who came to an event that I had. And one of the kids, Manny, he was like, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I can only be here for 10 minutes because I have to go to work." This is a high school student, right, who is activated and ready. And here's what brings me hope and why I want to go to Washington is that there are folks who are showing up at our events who are like, "I don't identify with any political party," or I used to be part of the Democratic Party, but I left," or folks who are just straight up, "I am a Republican, but you're a tough cookie," right? And so I think people understand that it is like literally all of us versus extremist billionaires in this moment. And like, I'm betting on us, and so are they. Because when I get to Washington, D.C., I know I'm not going alone. I am bringing all of these Minnesotans who are deeply invested in what happens in this country along with me. And I'm also under no illusions that somehow 2026 will be enough. As we talk about this organizing infrastructure, that's also what we're building here, which is for 2026, but 2028 and 2030 and 2032, with lasting infrastructure of new leaders who have been engaged in this campaign and engaged in this work, who will go on to run bigger races, who will go on to become super volunteers, who will go on to raise their hand and say, "I want to get in this fight and I want to run for office too." That is also the legacy of Minnesota, is investing in deep leadership and having a bench for folks for everything. And so that is what I am excited to bring to Washington, D.C. You know, as an organizer, I will have 99 cups of coffee, right, with my colleagues, and, know that my job is also to build relationships across lines of difference. And as a light skinned Native woman named Peggy Flanagan, I have been building bridges my entire life. And so that is the opportunity that's ahead of us. But people want more, and I'm excited to deliver that for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just curious. Do you think that senators in Democratic senators right now and in leadership are using their power effectively? And is there things, if you were there right now, would you be doing things differently? Because I do think people wonder, are you going to use your power when you have it? Right. And I'm hearing you talk about organizing, and you are an organizer, and that is important. But there are some organizers in there and they can't get traction because of the powers that be. How do you think about that? Also, in the vein of restoring more people's trust in Democrats and in government.
For sure. I'll take the second part first, which is I think people need to see you. And so we've done, over 100 events. We've got 44 stops. I was in Marshall, Minnesota, which is in southwestern Minnesota, and folks were like, "You've been here 3 times." I was like, "Yeah, because I'm serious." And so I think the way that we campaign is also a reflection of how we govern. And that is how we rebuild trust. You keep coming back, you have conversations. If people are upset with you, right, have critiques, take it. That is also like part of, this job. And when I see really these progressive champions who are leading in the Senate, I am deeply disappointed, right, that there were folks who cut a deal at the end of last year, right, which um, gutted healthcare for so many people. But now, coming up this week, there is another opportunity to say not one penny for ICE and for DHS, like this funding. It's outrageous. This should be a line in the sand when you see 2 Americans who were killed by federal agents. That alone should be enough. But if you need to see the fact that 5-year-olds and a 2-year-old were taken to Texas, that we are seeing people violently ripped from vehicles, flashbangs going off like it's a war zone, um, and just the chaos and terror that's being inflicted on our community, all in the name of safety, that should be enough. So if I were there, I would be setting myself on fire, telling people about what is happening in our streets, because it is not unique to Minneapolis. It is not unique in Minnesota. What is happening in our streets will come to your town. And it is about authoritarianism. It is about where we are going in this country. And to be clear, the letter that Pam Bondi sent to
The
Minnesota,
ransom note?
yeah, the ransom note, the extortion, right, of trying to secure our voter rolls and saying ICE will leave if you hand over our voter rolls. That's also, you are telling on yourself, lady, that this is what this is actually about. So if there is a line in the sand, it is right here. And I would be pushing folks to vote no. And frankly, that is also what I am using my platform for, and the relationships that we have with folks all across the country, asking them to call both of their senators and their member of Congress to say not one more penny for ICE.
Well, and I really do think a lot of people, especially primary voters, are looking for someone who's not going to fall into line with the old way of doing things, because it does feel like a lot of our senators do live in a bubble, not experiencing what you're experiencing on the ground there. So that is heartening to hear. Given the theme of the show, why we're doing Gloves Off, I want to know what gives you courage, what makes you brave and keep going, especially considering how much you and everyone in your state has been going through.
So, what gives me courage is Minnesotans. And, what I see happening literally every day: moms and dads outside of schools and daycares, um, delivering groceries to 260 families, right, in our church. Alex Preddy gives me courage. The amount of people who have gone through training since Renee Good and Alex Preddy were killed gives me tremendous courage. My kiddo, along with 2/3 of her middle school classmates, leading a walkout around their school in freezing cold temperatures, dressed as middle schoolers dress for the elements, right? Which is not great. Slides and Crocs, gives me so much courage. So if you are afraid, I get it. I'm scared too. But there are people acting bravely every single day, and you don't even have to look that hard for them. So we take a deep breath and we just get up and we do the work, because that is what is ahead of us. And I know this is one of those moments where people are asking themselves, right, like, how would I behave, right, in the civil rights movement or in the face of, the Holocaust, right? Like, right now, you get to decide, because we're in it. And I am proud to say that so many people in Minnesota can answer that question confidently, to say, with courage and deep love for my neighbor.
These conversations and the courage of these leaders are only as contagious as the audiences we reach. So if you felt inspired by this conversation and episode, please consider sharing it on your own social platforms and with your friends and networks. If you don't already, please follow Courier Newsroom wherever you follow news and information, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you can be the first to know when our next conversation drops. So excited to be in this fight with all of you. And until next time, please take care of yourselves. We need you.